Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, True Crime Astrology. Today I'm really looking forward to taking you through the birth chart of Ariel Castro. This is somebody who I've been interested in looking at their natal chart for a while now. So I am using this as an opportunity to really help you guys understand the aspects in here. There's some really interesting stuff that I think explains some of his motive and the reasons why he did what he did. And Ariel Castro, he is from Cleveland, Ohio, and he became famous for kidnapping three young women who he held captive in his home for a number of years. They did manage to escape, thankfully, and he was sentenced to life in prison, but he ended up committing suicide. So, like I said, I'm really going to take you through a lot of his chart and help you understand a lot of what some of these aspects mean. What can this tell us about his psychological makeup and why he kind of did what he did in terms of committing this crime? There's also a couple of dynamic configurations that have not come up yet with the charts I've covered. So for instance, he does have a grand trine and he has a T-square in his chart. So I'm going to explain those to you as well and what they mean. So his date of birth is July 10th, 1960. Per usual, I could not find an accurate birth time for him, so I have a 12 o'clock p.m. birth time. Since he is famous, he's a public figure, and I have his birthplace as Yauco, Puerto Rico. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is that he has the stellium in Cancer at the top of his chart. And if you watched the video I did on the singer rapper David last week, who is the suspect in his girlfriend's murder right now, he had a very, very tight stellium. This one is a bit looser, but this will, in effect, sort of bring the energy of these three planets very close together. So they'll kind of act a little bit as one and be a chain, if you will. It will just be looser than the very tight energy that was in David's stellium, for instance. So interestingly, the exact same planets in the stellium were in David's stellium. So it's comprised of his Sun, his Venus, and his Mercury. So for Ariel Castro, this does tell us that this is someone who is very ambitious, and he really gets stuff done. It's making a sextile to Mars, which is his action planet. So that further just heightens the energy of the stellium in that he really works and takes actions towards achieving what it is that he wants. Now, someone might be looking at this and thinking, well, he has all this Cancer energy. How on earth could he have committed this atrocious crime? And I understand, and I'm going to go into that. So, a couple of things. So, you know, every sign has its positives and its negatives. So, a negative or a possible negative for Cancer is that they tend to see themselves as the victim quite easily if they're not getting what they need. So, someone in effect might say, I can't do anything until I get what I need, until I feel better. Um, I think for him, he may have felt, like these girls, having these girls captivated and, holding them captive in his home was really the only thing that was going to make him feel better. Hence, he commits this awful crime. Another thing I do want to bring up that's very important is that whenever you're interpreting a natal chart, you always have to look at the ruling planet to get more information. So he has his sun in Cancer, which means we're going to look to the moon because the moon rules Cancer, and this moon happens to be in Aquarius. Now, this is going to be much different than, say, someone that had their sun and their moon in Cancer, or their sun in Cancer but their moon in Pisces or Taurus. So that is because Aquarius is completely incompatible with Cancer. These two signs have absolutely nothing in common. So, for example, Cancer is all about expression of emotions and feelings. They're very in touch with their feelings, with other people's feelings, whereas Aquarius is very much the opposite. So, Aquarius is not about expression of feelings, but it's about expression of ideas and, innovation and thoughts and sharing those thoughts and those ideas and beliefs with others. It really has nothing to do with being in touch with one's feelings or others' feelings. And this could make someone tend to be emotionally detached from others. It could make them a little aloof and detached from their own feelings and those of others. So I think that in his case, this just led towards his, having completely objectified his victims. He wasn't able to relate to them or empathize with them at all. He really just saw them as objects to use in order to meet his needs. Quite narcissistic. Um, Moon in Aquarius also means that you tend to want something different. So in his case, he wanted a different type of relationship with these women. And I want to talk about the fact the moon is in the fifth house. So the fifth house, in part, has to do with children and having children. So I wonder if this has to do with the fact that he kidnapped these three teenagers. Of course, they were more vulnerable. They were, likely more susceptible to just going with him. But I think that he kind of made them his wives as well. So I think it's interesting the moon is in the fifth house here because it's like he had his children at the same time that he had his wives. The fifth house also has to do with sex and the enjoyment of sex. So he's quite kinky. He has sexual needs that are different. He's aroused by things that are not necessarily normal. So that does not necessarily mean that he had to have done something illegal in this case. There's plenty of people that have Moon in Aquarius in the fifth house that could have kinks that are legal and completely safe. But for him, unfortunately, that was not the case. So now I want to talk about this grand trine that I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So a grand trine is when you have three planets making a trines to one another. So I am going to count the North Node. It's not technically a planet, but I am going to count the North Node as part of the grand trine here. So his Mars is making a trine to his North Node, and these are both making a trine to Saturn. So when you see a grand trine in someone's chart, it almost shows up as this big triangle. So with a grand trine, it's a very, very good aspect. It can bring a lot of success and a lot of fortune, especially if you are looking and going after what it is that you want. It's almost like the universe just opens up to you and provides you these opportunities. So unfortunately, in his case, I think that this had to do with his success as a kidnapper and the fact that he was able to get away with it for so many years. So the Grand Trine brought him each opportunity to kidnap these three young women who actually ended up going with him. And he was successful in really keeping them captive for many, many years until they escaped. He also has this T-square, which is a much more challenging configuration. And he happens to have a pretty nasty T-square. So he has the opposition of Uranus and his moon, and they are both making a square to Mars. So before I get into the planets, I do want to say that with a T square, someone can expend a lot of energy in a pretty quick amount of time towards getting something done. And then they can tend to look for the next big thing or the next project or the next move they can make where they will be just as assertive. So I wonder if this has to do with the fact that he kidnapped three women, like one wasn't enough. He had to torture multiple women at the same time. Um, but being, being as it may, um, I want to talk about this opposition first. So, moon opposing Uranus to me means that someone may have a difficult time really controlling their emotions. Their emotions may become quite erratic and unpredictable and impulsive. So someone could have quite big feelings. Um, Now, this all gets channeled through Mars. So whenever you have a T square, the energy of the opposition is going to get channeled and carried out through the planet to the side. So unfortunately, what this means for Ariel Castro and the people around him are that all of the unpredictable kind of mood swings that are happening here are going to get played out through the planet of action, aggression, anger, and sex. What makes matters worse in this case is that his Uranus is making a trine to Jupiter. And this is all fiery energy. This is in Sagittarius. This is in Leo. So that's just going to provide a lot of gusto, a lot of passion. And so I see this as amplifying the irritability, the erratic nature of his feelings. Also, Moon is making a square to Mars. Um, so whenever somebody has that aspect, there tends to be a lot of anger that is held around women or females. Now, David also had this aspect, and I don't think I really articulated enough that he also may have had a tendency to feel really angry and carry a lot of anger or aggression towards women or towards a woman in his life. So, you know, of course, if you have Moon square Mars, this does not mean that you're going to become violent or you're going to become aggressive. We all have choice in terms of how we use the energy in our charts. Unfortunately for Ariel Castro, he did become quite violent. I think this opposition, the trine to Jupiter, this just made it all worse. And so he wound up being violent with these women. He wound up raping them and torturing them. So I think that this all has a lot to do with the crime that he committed. Now, I do want to talk about the fact that his Mars is in Taurus in the eighth house. So this is a guy that has a lot of sexual energy, a lot of sexual desires and appetite because he does have Moon, which is what he needs in a sex house, the house of sex and sexual pleasures. And then the Mars, his action planet, is in Taurus in the eighth house, which has to do with attitudes about sex. So while the moon in Aquarius means he had quite unusual and kinky interests in sex, the Mars in Taurus tells me that he kept repeatedly kind of going back to the same kind of kink and pattern with sex over and over again. Also, I want to bring up that Mars in Taurus is quite determined. So, this is someone who, when they set their mind to something, they really carry it out, they really follow through. Um, and again, I think this has a lot to do with his success in terms of keeping these girls victims. He kept them in captivity and really hidden away for so many years. I do want to talk about Pluto. Um, when I first looked at his chart, I was a little surprised that it wasn't doing more in the chart. It's a bit of an outlier. So it is making this opposition to his Chiron, which is really important, and we'll get into that. But other than that, it's making this generational aspect to Neptune, which is very common in a lot of people's charts. It's not really that unique. And other than that, it's not doing much. So the more that I thought about it, the more that it kind of did make sense to me that Pluto is not a very active player in his chart. And that is because Pluto not only represents control and power, but it also represents the end of things and it represents death and destruction. I don't think he ever planned to end the dynamic to what was going on. I mean, he had these three women locked up for so many years and he never killed any of them. He never got bored with any of them. He never killed any of them if they were disobeying him and said, well, let me go replace her with another one. So I think that's because his Pluto is quite weak. I know that he threatened to kill Michelle Knight when he was trying to get her to deliver the baby that he had with Amanda Berry, but I think that was an empty threat. I think given his chart and the Pluto and its position in his chart, I don't think he would have actually murdered her. Um, so Pluto opposing Chiron is very interesting. This is where we get more into the meat of his unconsciousness, his real psychological, like bottom of his soul makeup. So Pluto opposing Chiron means that someone might really worry that their power will be taken away from them or that they will be made to look or feel weak. And it's really interesting that Chiron is in his fifth house here because the fifth house also has to do with dating and romance. So I think that what this tells me is that he could really have issues with allowing himself to really bond with a woman in a romantic sense for fear of being heartbroken or rejected. So, as awful as what he did was, I think he found a strategy to get what he wanted because he's so kind of obsessed with sex. But he could not really bond with a woman and have a traditional romantic relationship. He found this strategic way to get his sexual needs met in a different way. And I'm going to go into this more a little bit later. So I do see Saturn as playing a much more active role for him in terms of the crime. So first of all, Saturn is in the fourth house, the house of home and family. And this goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning with the Cancer energy. I think that he may have felt in his twisted mind that he actually was caring for these women and that they would be better off with him rather than out on the street to fend for themselves. So, of course, he wasn't actually caring about them, right? I mean, he locked them up, he didn't allow them freedom, he only fed them once a day, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we have to remember that he is objectifying these girls. He doesn't have the capacity to really become emotionally attached and to relate to them. So they are just there to meet his needs. But in his distorted way of thinking, I think he may justify the crime by saying to himself that he is taking care of them. He is providing a roof over their head, he's feeding them, right? Um, Also, I think it's really ironic that his job was a school bus driver. So this is perfect with Saturn being in the fourth house because it was essentially his job to make sure that the children got home from school safely. I don't think I mentioned yet, he also has Mars making a trine to Saturn. So again, that is great for somebody who really wants to plan carrying out a long-term goal, which he did. But we will see that his Saturn has some challenging aspects. So one of them is that it's making an inconjunct to Uranus. So This does tell me that he really, he's a rebel. He breaks the rules, he bends the rules to suit his needs. And although he knows what the rules are, rules and traditions could be important to him in some sense, they don't always fit with what he is going to deem is best for him. Again, this is a quite a narcissistic person. So he's very easily able to say, oh, well, that's not going to work for me. So I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to break the rule here. And he ends up getting fired as a bus driver for like doing things like leaving the bus unattended, making an illegal U-turn. As I said before, Uranus is also trine Jupiter, so that's just going to beef up this desire to do whatever he wants, to not necessarily pay attention as much to following the rules as he should. Now, I do want to mention, I'm going to get more into this at the end. He ended up breaking his own rules, which I think is very ironic because he left the door unlocked, which led to Amanda Berry escaping and getting the girls out of there. So even though he had rules for himself about keeping the girls locked up and away from society, it may not have suited him in that moment to really make sure the door was locked. Maybe he was in a rush or um, he was really rushing to get somewhere important. So he doesn't pay attention and he's not following the rule that he set for himself. Now, he does have Saturn making an opposition to his sun. This is probably one of the most challenging aspects that someone could have in their natal chart. So this definitely means he struggled with low self-esteem, low self-confidence. Again, this tells me he had a problem with authority. So someone with this aspect may really not want to work for anybody else. They may find a way to work for themselves or become the authority, so to speak. But again, this is a deeper, this is an aspect that shows us much things, that go below the surface that he doesn't show, obviously, which is that he dealt with really low self-confidence. Now, Saturn here is also going to be opposing the Venus because it's part of the stellium and it is conjunct the sun. So Saturn making an opposition to Venus means that someone could really feel that they are not deserving of love or respect or romance. So somebody with this aspect might choose partners that are emotionally unavailable. They might just choose to avoid dating and romance in and of itself. He has so much sexual proclivity and appetite that, again, I don't think it would work for him to avoid women altogether. I think that, again, he found this strategy towards getting what he wanted in a way that he could completely control. And this just adds a layer to the puzzle piece of Pluto opposing Chiron. Because again, I talked about the fact that it's in his fifth house. And so he is really afraid of getting rejected or heartbroken by a partner. And this just adds on to that. He doesn't really even feel that he's deserving of a love interest or a romantic partner. Now, the last thing I want to bring up, and this is just a theory I have based on Saturn opposing Sun and Venus, is that I honestly wonder if subconsciously he left the door unlocked for the girls to escape. I don't think at all this was conscious on his part, but I think that somewhere deep down in the basement of his soul, he may have really felt like he did not deserve to have these women around. He didn't deserve to have them at his beck and call and to be having sex with them. And so he left an opportunity for them to escape because he didn't feel that they deserved to be there. It's really interesting because I looked at the transits for the time of the escape with Amanda Berry's natal chart, and there was so much going on for her. Like, She had Venus on her Venus, which creates a huge opportunity for someone to get what they want, and to have success and luck. So it just so happened that she noticed the door was open, and she went for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if with this aspect and with the Uranus making the inconjunct to Saturn as well, that he may have left them various opportunities to leave. But of course, they were just so scared. Maybe they just felt they couldn't escape or they never really saw the opportunities. But I wouldn't be surprised if he left the door unlocked, on numerous occasions. So that is my analysis of Ariel Castro's chart. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your ideas are or your opinions. Um, I'd really love to hear from you. Please subscribe to my channel if you love true crime and you love astrology and you want to learn more about the natal charts of people in true crime in the media. Stay tuned for more videos and thank you so much for watching.